Hello everyone, welcome back, and yes, I know I'm a bit late with this video, sorry for that. I couldn't get it done before she released and I did post an update yesterday mentioning it, so hopefully you guys knew about this. But anyway, Lainie is already here now, and honestly she is one of the more unique units we have gotten in a while. Not just in terms of her kit design, but also in terms of where she fits in the current meta picture. She is arriving right after Voimastina, and many of you might be wondering if she is worth going for to slot in beside Voimastina for your physical team, or if she is a skip. There are some quirks to the final recommendation, so let's go through everything first. Her kit, her core mechanic with her clone and stuff, dupes, team comps, the whole thing, and get you a clear answer. Let's get into it. TLDR first as always. Lainie is a physical SMG sentinel. Her role is primarily as a defense reduction sub DPS, who functions alongside physical carries like Voimastina to boost her damage even more. Lainie is not a hyper carry, and she is not a pure support either, she sits in the middle. Her whole identity revolves around two things. First, her passive defense debuff aura called Precognition Foresight that reduces enemy defenses when they take physical damage, which helps with pushing their defense below 0 even more, triggering bonus damage multipliers for the whole physical team. You should already know it by this point, that's how the physical team work and your Voimastina does more damage. Second, her unique Simulacrum mechanic. Her ultimate summons a clone of herself on the field and mirrors and responds to her actions, meaning you get two Lainies acting in sync. This clone also has the same defense debuff passive aura, effectively doubling it. But here's my honest full recommendation and I will explain why. Lainie, in my opinion, is not mandatory. She does her job, which is defense reduction, and she does it well. But you are not going to feel like you are missing out hugely if you skip her. My recommendation is, if you have Voimastina and are very well invested into building a good physical team, getting Lainie V0 is a fine pickup right now. She contributes enough to make the team run better. But if you are tight on resources or still building other teams, you don't have to go for her just because you pulled Voimastina. She is a comfortable skip. And let me also show you how you can figure out if you need Lainie right now or not. So here's the details on Reversed Assault, the physical team's core mechanic of doing more damage, scaling with how much defense reduction the enemy has. You can see there's tiers of increasing damage multiplier based on reaching certain additional defense reduction thresholds, and those are at 100% more, 200% more and 300% more. Remember, this is additional reduction beyond the first 100%. So basically there are 4 tiers. First one when you have a total of 100% plus defense reduction on the enemy, then a total of 200% plus, then 300% plus, and finally a total of 400% plus defense reduction. Are you with me till now? I hope you are. So, to reach the highest damage multiplier tier, you need to achieve 400% defense reduction on the enemy. Anything between 300% to 399%, you are on the same tier. So, while every bit of defense reduction do matter for more damage, I would refer to these thresholds for figuring out if getting Lainie will push you into the higher tier or not, cause that will be a significant improvement, otherwise it won't be that significant. Fortunately for us, I have found this chart from Reddit thanks to user Accelerator8964 that shows all your sources of defense reductions, so you can calculate yourself. Let's do that. Let's assume you are borrowing a V6 R1 Voimastina. So according to this chart, you will get 50 plus 30 plus 50 plus 40 plus 75 plus 20 equals to 265% defense reduction already. Let's assume you also got a V1 R1 UV, which gives you 60 plus 5 plus 10 equals to 75% more, totaling 340% defense reduction. As you can see, this chart also includes sources from V6 Klukai and Lind, which you can count if you are using them, but I'm only considering physical units for now. So from Lainie, we can see at V0 you get 20% and at V3 40% defense reduction. So even with a V3 Lainie, you will reach 380% total defense reduction from 340%, which means you are still in the same tier and you do not reach the 400% threshold for the upgrade, making pulling for Lainie less valuable in this case. But if only you are using a V6 R5 Voimastina, then that gets you 25% more defense reduction, reaching you 405% total, which is the highest tier. So if you want to reach that, then Lainie becomes important. I hope it was understandable. This was a very basic explanation and only calculated for Voimastina's ult damage. It will differ for her other skills, and maybe for those with just a V0 Lainie, you can reach the 300% threshold from like a 280% limit before that, which will make it beneficial for you. So you gotta do the calculation yourself with what you got and see if getting Lainie helps you reach that higher tier or not. Okay, enough talking numbers and stuff. If you are not that heavily invested into it, as I said, C is a pretty safe skip, or V0 if you like her and want to boost your physical team just a little more. Both her V1 and her weapon does have a similar effect on her damage output. V1 is recommended more as it's on the way to her V3. You can pick up her signature weapon after her V1, but also giving her Swarog is absolutely okay if you are just getting her V0. Don't spend anymore. One more thing I have to say, this is important. Many of you have gotten Phoemastina to make your gameplay more auto-friendly. Lainie is not auto-friendly at all. Her clone needs to stay close to enemies to do its job, but when you run on auto, the AI prioritizes getting behind cover and ends up too far from enemies to trigger her mechanics. You can't set up the clone's behavior from the auto control settings either. Just wanted to let you know this beforehand. Alright, let's get into her skill kit. Lainie's whole kit is built around the interaction between herself and her simulacrum, so I'll go through each skill and then explain what the simulacrum does in response. Their actions are chained between each other, so if Lainie uses a skill, then her clone uses the corresponding skill too. And similarly, you can also actively use a clone skill which will trigger Lainie's corresponding skill. You can choose any of them to use their skill actively, but depending on who you choose to actively use the skill with, the effects slightly differ. Her skill 1 is Combat Algorithm. This is her main single target damage skill, targeted 7-tile range, 140% attack physical damage, stability damage 5. When the simulacrum is present on field, after Lainie uses Combat Algorithm, the simulacrum fires Offense Simulation centered on itself. Offense Simulation is an AoE skill at 140% attack, hitting all enemies within a 3-tile radius, though the damage multiplier drops by 20% per additional target, down to a minimum of 80%. The key interaction here is that if Offense Simulation hits enemies whose defense is at 0 or below, Combat Algorithm then ignores 30% of the target's defense, so the pair of skills are rewarding each other for correctly pushing the defense into negative. Her skill 2 is Computational Crush. This is the AoE option. She selects a tile within 7-tile range and deals 120% attack AoE physical damage to all enemies in a 3-tile radius. Can't be reused until the next allied round. If Simulacrum is on field, it triggers Hash Rate Overclock. Same thing from the Simulacrum's position, 120% attack AoE, and it applies movement down 1 on targets for 2 turns. If on the other hand you use Clone skill actively and it hits 2 or fewer enemies, it boosts Computational Crush's stability damage by 5 points as their skills trigger back to each other. Her ultimate is Simulated Partner. She selects an empty tile within 7 tiles and summons her Simulacrum there. Both Lainie and the Simulacrum get bonded possibility for 1 round. This increases stability damage dealt by 3 points. At the end of each round, 3 Confectance indexes are subtracted, and if it runs out of Confectance, the Simulacrum disappears. You can't resummon while one is already active. The Simulacrum also has an ult, Queenside Castle, a utility skill where it swaps positions with Lainie and gains extra command. This is great for repositioning quickly and can be manually triggered. Her passive is Precognition Foresight, and this is the backbone of her value in the physical team. For every 12 points of her initial max HP, she gains 0.1% crit, up to a maximum of 30%. More importantly, she applies the Precognition Foresight debuff to all enemies within 7 tiles. This debuff causes those enemies to lose 10% defense every time they receive physical damage. Before every active attack, she applies 1 stack of Parapluie's Penetration on the target, and after the attack, she gains 2 Confectance index. If the target's defense is already at 0 or below when she attacks, she gets an additional damage multiplier equal to 10% of her initial max HP and gains 1 more Confectance. After any active attack, she cannot make another active attack that same round, so her turn is 1 active skill per round. The Simulacrum has its own mirrored passive, Precognition Awareness, which does essentially the same thing. Defense reduction debuff on enemies within its own 7-tile radius, doubling the total value to 20%, and the same Parapluie's Penetration stacking before attacks. This is a debuff that stacks up to 3 times, and each stack reduces the target's defense by 15% when they take damage from Lainie or her Simulacrum. So at max 3 stacks, that's a 45% additional defense reduction per hit on top of the base debuff. The whole system basically means you have two defense stripping units with overlapping auras, both applying parapluies penetration and precognition debuffs, effectively melting enemy defense for the entire physical team. That's Lainie's role. For Vertebrae, I already mentioned the key breakpoints, but let me be specific about it. V1 reduces simulated allies cooldown by 1 turn and lowers the simulacrum's confectance consumption by 1 per round. It also extends Parapluie's penetration maximum stack to 6, and when summoning the simulacrum, she now applies 2 stacks of Parapluie's penetration to all enemies within 3 tiles of the summon tile and gains 3 confectance index. This is a quality of life and damage upgrade for Lainie and her simulacrum. Very good. V3 is the actual important one. Precognition Foresight and Precognition Awareness both change from reducing defense by 10% to 20%, making the total debuff by 40%. The crit scaling from HP also improves. Now it's 0.1% per 6 HP instead of 12, doubling the max crit gain from 30% to 60%. And when attacking enemies at 0 or below defense, her damage multiplier from HP scales up to 20% of initial max HP instead of 10%. This Vertebrae basically doubles how much she strips enemy defenses, which is critical for the physical team's defense threshold calculations. And finally, V6 is the big personal damage upgrade. Combat algorithm and offense simulation jump to 160% attack damage. Offense simulation's minimum multiplier rises to 100% regardless of how many targets it hits. And the restriction preventing you from using those skills again the same round is removed. This completely changes how she can rotate her skills and is a major DPS jump for her personally. For weapons, her signature is of course the best. It has physical damage scaling and defense ignore, which feeds directly into her core damage engine. The combination of her own passive defense stripping and the weapon's additional defense penetration starts pushing enemies below 0 defense much more reliably. It has a similar impact compared to her V1, so is usually recommended to get after her V1 on her way to V3. One thing to mention here, when it says if other allies have the same effect, you don't need to worry about that since her clone uses the same weapon, so it automatically activates this condition. But it's not mandatory to have this weapon if you are not going for a dupes and plan to stay at V0. Swarog is the go-to free-to-play choice, which also works really well for her. It gives defense ignore per debuff on the target, which synergies well with her kit since she is always loading debuffs onto enemies. She is not your hyper carry, so her weapon is less impactful on her, so she can work with Swarog. Basically, the signature is recommended for maxing her out, especially at V3+, when her defense threshold breaking becomes really consistent. But it's not an absolute must at V0. For her build, the recommended main set is physical boost, straightforward choice. Her attachment stat priorities are attack percentage, flat attack, crit rate and crit damage. But remember that her passive gives her crit scaling from HP, and to get the max crit rate from that passive, you need to have 3600 initial HP on Lainie. Make sure you have that. If needed, you can equip attachments with HP lines instead of crit rate lines to achieve that, since your crit rate requirements are lower with her passive. Your final target attack is 4k plus, crit rate 70% below V3 since you get 30% from the passive, or only 40% at V3 plus since you get 60% from your passive from there, and 160% crit damage as an endgame full build. For fixed keys, key 1 is the core sustain key. When either Lainie or the simulacrum is healed, the other half also gets 20% max HP restored. Key 6 increases crit damage dealt against enemies at 0 or below defense by 5%. Key 5 for buff dispels. She also comes with her expansion key. It enhances Parapluie's penetration to reduce defense by an additional 6% per stack. And when Lainie or the simulacrum uses their main skills, every point of confectance index Lainie holds increases both their crit damage by 15%. This is a very meaningful personal upgrade for her. Her common key is one of the best physical team key, plus 10% damage against enemies at 0 or below defense, which honestly you might wanna put on your Voimastina maybe. Lainie will work with any other DPS keys with preference for Ulrith, Yuhi's keys, etc. But make sure to give your best ones to Voimastina first. If you are borrowing Voimastina, then Lainie can get the good ones. Also make sure to always evolve your good keys for attack percentage, crit rate and crit damage lines. Her remolding core have 4 sentinel slots, 1 tank and 1 vanguard slot. The recommended red flowers are attack boost, throne breaker and area specialization, beheading blade for your purple flower and annular defense, or anything to be honest for the blue flower. Prioritize crit damage as substats on these. Lainie slots into the physical team primarily as the defense reduction unit. Her best partners are Voimastina as the hyper carry and Yuhi as the physical team support. The three of them together form the physical core trio. To fulfill the team right now, you have options. The best ones are Ulrich and Diane, of course, but you can also use QJ without her expansion key using only support attacks as an alternative to any of these two if you don't have them. In future, when Cheyan releases, she will take up one of the DPS spots and you can fill the other one with either of Ulrich or Diane. And finally, with the latest Alter Groza release in CN, she takes up that last DPS spot as well, replacing both Ulrich and Diane from the physical team. This is the current meta physical team in CN, so you can plan accordingly. But you can also build some really impactful hybrid teams with the core trio as well. The best two in this case will be Klukai V6 and Lind. We have already seen before that these two will contribute towards the defense reduction as well, which is fantastic for this team. Her skill rotation differ before V6 and after that. The rotation at V0 to V5 is Alt, then skill 1, then skill 2, then skill 1 again and repeat. Simple loop. At V6 the rotation gets more flexible because her S1 no longer locks you out that round, so you can chain it more aggressively. The most important thing for her rotation and playstyle is the positioning of the simulacrum. You want to summon it close to the enemy, not tucked behind your own team. Her simulacrum's defense debuff aura needs to overlap with the enemies to apply those defense reduction debuffs. In the team, she usually goes right after Yuhi, usually second in order, as her main purpose is setting up more defense reduction than doing more damage. So you can follow up her action with your better damage dealer hyper carries like Voimastina or Cheyan, etc. Alright, final verdict time. Lainie is a cute doll. The long grey hair, the tactical gear, the holographic clone mechanic, those armpits, yeah, great design honestly. If you like her look or want her for collection, go for it. On the meta side, the honest assessment is this. She is a solid filler unit for the physical team who genuinely contributes meaningful defense reduction, especially at V3. She is not mandatory. She does not have tight synergy with the physical team's other units beyond filling the defense reducer slot. And you are not going to be locked out of physical team content without her. If you already have Voimastina and Yuhi and want to push that team further, Lainie V0 is a fine investment. If you are waiting and saving for future units, she is a comfortable skip. For spenders, the path is V0 to V3. That's where her team contribution is meaningfully better, with the defense reduction doubling from the passive upgrade. You can get her signature weapon after her V1 on your way to V3, but otherwise it's not a hard recommendation. V6 is her personal damage peak if you are going all in. V2, V4 and V5 are incremental upgrades and not worth targeting specifically. And that's the full breakdown on Lainie. She is the third ump sister we got with a very appealing design. Let me know in the comments what you think. Are you pulling Lainie for the physical team, or do you want to complete your ump family for collection, or are you holding your resources for any future targets? I would love to hear your plans. If you found this video helpful, please drop a like and subscribe, hit the hype button, join the channel membership or send a super thanks if you want to support the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will catch you in the next one. Goodbye.